folks, this is Graham Weimiller. This is the $10 million tutorial. This is episode 3. Thanks very much for coming back. I appreciate it. I hope you have a chance to like, subscribe, and comment on episodes 1 and 2, and certainly this episode as well. And so, we talked about kind of the why for the $10 million tutorial in episode 1. Episode 2, we started to lay some foundation with the discussion about mission, vision, and values, and how important it is to create those organically, to make sure that they're shared widely, and then to update those roughly every year. And in doing so, you will have more clarity, but you will ignite the talent around you, and you will certainly attract and retain really high-performing teammates that will help you achieve your dreams and help your clients and customers achieve their goals as well. So mission, vision, and values, really important part of the foundation. And once those are in place, we want to start talking about recruiting and how do you build a high-performing team. And again, the $10 million tutorial is focused on businesses that are currently generating roughly $200,000 to $2 million in revenue. I see a lot of opportunity to help those kind of businesses scale to becoming worth at least $10 million. And why is that the case? Well, we know as those businesses scale that they will create lots of opportunities for communities around the world. That is always important, and it is especially important now. And we know from episode 1 that the way that we're going to do that is we're going to be really intentional about how we build the business, and that the underpinnings for that valuation are going to be driven in large part by how much EBITDA is the company producing, what's the multiple that's applied to that EBITDA, that will equal the valuation. But there's so many things that go into creating growing healthy EBITDA, creating a great multiple that lead to that valuation. So we're in the very early innings, putting in place some of the foundational elements to help your business leapfrog forward. And we remember what Tom Peters taught us. Excellence is what we do in the next 5 minutes. So whatever you take away from any of these episodes, it's really what you put into practice, and the faster you put it into practice, the more momentum you will build. So today is about recruiting, starting to build a high-performing team. We're going to have a lot of episodes around team development. It's a huge passion of mine. I enjoy seeing teammates, taking on more responsibility, really achieving their dreams, and certainly having a chance to play a role in their career, just like many leaders have played a role in my career, and I'm so thankful to each of them for that. So when we talk about team, I want to make sure we take a really expansive view of team in general. So we want to think about certainly, our full-time teammates, our part-time teammates, but also contractors and consultants, even vendors certainly, and really our customers as well. As the leader of your business, you want to make sure that things are really aligned to benefit all of those stakeholders. That's really important. And where you see areas of conflict, you really want to examine those, because when the business is set up for success, it's really set up to benefit all stakeholders. So the other thing that I'd offer up is distinguishing between a task and a role. So how many of you have ever had a situation where you've asked a manager, do they, would they like another person on their team? How often do they say no? They never say no. They always are ready to build their team, right? And that's normal and natural because they want to have more and more impact. But what I'm trying to mention here is it's important to distinguish really between a task and a role. For most of the businesses that are watching this series, payroll is going to be your largest element of your operating expense. And so it's the most important to be intentional with. And if you're not careful, every time a new task comes up, if you're adding a new, head count, your P&L is going to get out of whack, and you're really not going to build a healthy EBITDA and a healthy business in the same way as if you're really intentional around that resource. Remember, as business leaders, we want to be great stewards of the limited resources we have. It doesn't matter how big of a business you have. If you're a public company and Fortune 500 company, you still have limited resources relative to the opportunity set, relative to all the projects that you'd like to accomplish. So every business out there needs to be a good steward of resources, but particularly businesses that are currently creating between 200,000 and 2 million in revenue. So being really intentional about the difference between a task and a new headcount, that's really important. But with that being the case, let's start out with the first part. So when we're talking about building a really high performing team, it's really important to think about who is doing that recruiting. And so one of the sayings that I really subscribe to, and I'll share these sayings, various sayings throughout these episodes, is that, A players hire A players. B players hire C and D players. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if you have a really high performing teammate, it's really good to have them involved in the recruiting process. They're going to have a really high bar for people that they're going to be interviewing and making offers to. And if you have a teammate that's not really as engaged, or for whatever reason not really performing at a high level, you really want to think twice about whether they should be leading the recruitment effort versus some of the A players on your team. So A players hire A players, B players hire C and D players. So again, we want A players to really be leading the recruitment effort as you are growing your business. Another thing that I'm a big believer in is managers recruiting the talent to build their team. Now, this sounds really obvious, but as your business grows, you may have an HR function or someone serving part-time in that HR function, and you may be tempted to have that HR person, own the recruiting process for a certain role. And there's a lot of ways that can not work out well. Now, a lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, the line manager, the person that needs that new teammate on their team, is really busy. So, do we really want them kind of caught up in a lot of interviews? And what I would say is, as a manager, as a leader, recruiting talent is absolutely essential. And so you want managers on your team that love to take an active role in the recruitment process, as opposed to letting maybe HR just present them their new teammate at the end of the recruiting process. Now, I'm not suggesting that HR can't play a really key role. They should, of course. But what I'm saying is that managers who are building their teams know best what skills they're looking for. They know best the culture of their team. So that's in addition to the culture of the organization, the culture of the team that they're trying to build. And so, and you really want them to feel excited and feel ownership about that team as they're growing. So best if the managers really take a big role in recruiting for their own team. That sounds obvious, but not always how it happens in all organizations. Now, I do want to spend a minute talking about recruiters. And let me say that, I've had a chance to work with contingent recruiters and retained recruiters, and they serve an important role in many situations. At the same time, I will say there is a danger in working with a recruiter, because in some cases, the team or the manager may feel that the candidates that are being offered up are really well vetted and they're going to be a great fit. And sometimes they are, and sometimes maybe they're not as thoroughly vetted for one reason or another. And some recruiters are really incentivized to make the placement and then, kind of move on to the next project. Not all. There are terrific recruiters out there to be sure. However, we want to make sure, again, that our managers are really driving the process with help from potentially HR or with help from potentially even recruiters. But we don't want to outsource the recruitment process. That's the most important thing we do as business leaders. We don't want to really outsource that to someone who's external to the organization, and just kind of let that happen and show up at the end with a candidate or two to select from. We really want to make sure that our managers are leading the recruitment process. Really, really important point. And a lot of people think that I make that point because, it's to save on the recruitment costs. That's not the point at all. The cost of having a hire not work out well, it's really a big cost in opportunity cost. And on the other side of it, when a recruiting process works out really well, the benefits are amazing. And, whatever part of your business isn't as successful as you want it to be, it's amazing when you add top talent. That part of your business that is really, kind of a weak point, frustrating point, it can just turn into a bright spot and take off. And the difference is having a great recruitment process and getting a top A player in, because again, that A player will hire other A players around them. So recruiters, just be thoughtful about when and how to work with them, and just make sure that the manager who is adding to their team is really driving the process and very, very involved in that recruitment. Okay, so that's a little bit about the who of the recruitment process. Let's talk about the how. Well, I'm a big believer in following kind of a two-pronged approach. Number one, casting a wide net. So, there's many sites now that you can post on, and you'll get tons of applicants, and really being thoughtful about the posting is important, making sure that it really tells the story, and not only where your organization is today, but where it's going. Remember, the mission, vision, and values that we talked about in episode 2 can play a really key role in the recruitment process, and the postings that you're putting up. You'll attract the right people. So the wide net of posting on job sites is good and helpful and important, and there's a lot of talent that will apply, but it will be a very wide range of folks that apply. Then also doing a networked search, in other words, asking your team to really be thinking about their networks. And remember that really talented teams somehow tend to have really talented networks. And so that's really a great two-prong approach to have. So a wide net, and then kind of a network search for talent, and bringing those two together. The recruitment process should be very collaborative. In other words, not just with a hiring manager or two. You want to have a number of people meeting with candidates, and it doesn't really matter what the role is, whether it's a junior role, mid-level role, senior role. You want to have between 5 and 10 teammates taking part in that interview process. For one, it's really helpful for junior and mid-level managers to get a lot of experience in how your organization does recruiting. It's a way that they have a chance to see what talent is out there as they're growing other departments. So you want to have a very collaborative process, and you also want to have a multiple round process. I would say 3 rounds, and not necessarily more than that unless it's needed, but not less than that either. So I think 3 rounds of interviews. So what do I mean? Let me be clear. So a candidate may come in either in person or virtual, and they may have 4 sets of interviews with 2 of your teammates in each interview. And so at the end of that afternoon, that would be 1 round of interviews. Maybe in the second round, you have a subset of those teammates from your team interviewing the candidate again, but then a 3rd round to confirm everything that was discussed in round 1 and 2. It also gives the candidate a chance to ask different questions in different rounds. I thought I heard you say this. Was that right? What do you think about this? And so that meeting of the minds is really important for a good fit. So 3 rounds of interviews for any role, I think, is really best practice. Now, the 2 things that I think are really important to look for are a sense of urgency and an attention to detail. A sense of urgency and an attention to detail. So why is that important? Well, business happens at a certain velocity, and velocity tends to build on itself. And so a sense of urgency is really important. And then attention to detail. Do they really care about the work? And are they producing client-ready work? In other words, if they're doing something for an internal teammate, is it at the same quality as it would be if you're sending that work to an external customer or client? So a sense of urgency and attention to detail are important. And sometimes you can get a sense for that if you look at the format of their resume. Is it neatly presented? Does it present actual numbers on what they've been able to achieve versus just generalities? So taking a look at the format and the content of a resume or a CV can be really important, taking a step back and really gauging those 2 things. And then another indicator of kind of sense of urgency, attention to detail, is a high GPA. And it doesn't matter what institution as much that someone went to. It's more whatever institution they went to for education, did they care about what they were doing? And if so, it usually shows up in a high GPA. And so oftentimes I will ask candidates that are many years out of college, for example, and they're often surprised, when I ask, but I often find that, a high GPA is a great indicator, throughout someone's career. Now, when you're talking with a candidate, your teammates should really be looking for the what and the how. So what have they accomplished in their career? And past performance is a good indicator of future performance. It's the best indicator we have. So what have they accomplished, but also how did they accomplish it? And how are they likely to accomplish what you want them to accomplish? In other words, are they going to work in a really positive way and be really collaborative? Or do they have a different approach? And, obviously we're looking for the former. And so, some people call it the airplane test, the what and the how being the airplane test. Will we enjoy working with this person? Are they going to be fun? Are they going to be, hardworking, but not take themselves too seriously? Those things are really important to tease out. What I often find in any interviewing process is that 80% of the candidates have the ability to do a great job in the role. So it's not usually about their kind of raw intellect. It's really about the how and the interpersonal. And that's the case whether it's a junior, mid-level, or senior role. The capability is usually there by the time they get to the interview process. Then at that point, it's really about fit with the culture of the organization that you have today and what you want it to be in the future. One of the things I wanted to share is that, when we're recruiting really high performing teammates, I have often found that they are good at two very different things. And so they may be really good at, their work. Let's say they're a social media expert. So they may be really good at, optimizing and just content and theme and, really good about compelling content and just the work at hand from their prior experiences. But they also may be good at violin or swimming or, artwork, whatever it is. They tend to have two very disparate things that they're very good and passionate about. I don't know why that is, but I've just found that as a something that correlates with teammates that are excellent on both the what and the how. Now, when we're recruiting teammates, especially teammates at the junior and mid-level, but really all levels, we're looking for scalability. How much do they fit the existing role that we need to fill now? But more importantly, far more importantly, what might they be doing in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? Because we're going to invest a lot of time and effort to onboard this person. We're going to put them into a lot of leadership development, training, and we're going to continue to support and recognize their accomplishments. And so whether it's a teammate, that is taking on one role today or another, it's not about those, it's not about that role. It's about what they're going to be doing in 3, 5, or even 10 years. So scalability is really key. Now, I would say after the interview process is done, one key step, which I can't overstate, is validation. So in other words, verifying the information that's been provided. And of course, here we're talking about, criminal background checks and credit checks, if that's applicable in your country or jurisdiction. Again, you want to make sure you're following whatever regulations are relevant within your particular jurisdiction. But references, can't overstate the importance of references. And, we'll go deep on kind of how to do references and do them well in a future episode. But I do think it's one of the most underappreciated parts of the recruiting process and really creating a high performing team. And we found that spending a lot of time thoughtfully with the right references can be really helpful in selecting the right teammates, but more importantly, in how we support that teammate once they're on board. And so if we're just doing kind of perfunctory reference checks, it may not kind of provide as much value in the recruiting process, and especially the onboarding and the support process for that new teammate once they're on board. So we'll do a whole session on that in a future episode, but verifying and validating the information provided in the recruitment process is key. So make sure again that the hiring manager is involved in that as opposed to it just kind of being outsourced to a third party, external, or even internal to the organization. One step I would offer up, finally, as part of this how part of building a great team is, taking a moment to send a note to that prospective candidate when they get the offer letter. So, many times we're busy, we've been working on projects and we're recruiting, and then we feel like we got a good fit, and then the offer letter goes out the door. Well, I think it makes sense to take a moment to send a letter at that moment to accompany the offer letter. And that letter says, here's a note from you as the president or CEO of the business about what you expect from, new teammates. And it's going to be things like that you would really focus on building the culture of the organization, that you put client and customer needs first, that you work in a way that is positive and supportive of other teammates that, are part of the organization. But you lay out the expectations in a 1 or 2 page letter, and that letter goes with the offer letter. Okay, that's really important because you want candidates to take a step back, take a deep breath and say, is this the organization for me? Is it the right fit? And no worries if they decide at that point, something about the culture doesn't, jive with them. That's okay. That's okay. Of course, you have a very positive culture, I'm sure, and it's going to attract the right kind of candidates, but you want them to take a deep breath before they sign that offer letter so they really understand what the expectations are. And expectation setting is so important for any business leader, any manager, and especially in the recruitment process, making sure that everybody has the same expectations when you're launching into a new hiring process is essential. Okay. Final point for this episode is this 67%. So what is that 67% all about? Well, let me just tell you, I have had a chance to be a part of lots of recruiting processes over many, many years in many different settings and different geographies, etc. And something that a mentor once told me has always rung true, that, if you're really trying to create a world-class organization with a really high-performing team, no matter how much you do in terms of recruiting and screening, and you do your best to onboard and support, those new hires are only going to work out about 67% of the time. What do I mean? So after a year of that new teammate being on board, only about 2 out of 3 are going to end up, working out and being a long-term fit. 1 out of 3, for one reason or another, won't be. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is, as a business leader, a lot of times we can feel bad or guilty about, having high standards. But remember, when you're having high standards, what you're doing is you're committing to your customers that you are going to deliver to the best of your ability and meet their needs. And what you're also saying to your other stakeholders, in other words, your employees and your vendors, that you're going to do your best to have high standards to really help them be successful as well. And so I'm just mentioning that, across sort of all companies, all situations, et cetera, that, the organizations that have a really high standard will likely have a situation where something around 2 out of 3 of their hires will really work out, but 1 out of 3 may not. And of course, in those situations, we want to be compassionate and do everything we can to help that teammate transition in a positive way. Most of the time, what I find is that if someone really cares about the work that they're doing and the mission, vision, values of the organization that they're working with, they really care, everything is going to work out fine. We can get them some more coaching, some more training, more recognition in some cases, all those things we can do. But when someone isn't as engaged or maybe not as passionate and not thinking about, the work that the organization does is really a mission, then, that's where things may not work out for the long term. But as long as someone really cares, usually there's the components for success. So anyway, just want to mention that if you're holding a really high standard, which you should be, as a business that has big aspirations, don't feel bad or guilty about the idea that, 1 out of 3 may not work out. That is just sort of been what organizations, everywhere sort of experience. So with that, hopefully this episode 3, just some starter points around building a ultra high performance team. Hopefully this is helpful. If so, please like, subscribe, comment below, and I look forward to being back with you for episode 4 as we work together and learn together to help you create a business that is worth at least $10 million. Have a great day and take care. Bye-bye.